Most people fail not because they're lazy. They fail because they've been taught to think like the middle class. And here's the cruel part. Nobody warns them about it. You've probably heard that if you work hard, you'll succeed. Your parents told you. Your teachers reinforced it. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The top 1% of earners, the ones who build real wealth, who create lasting impact, they don't think about hard work the same way you do. They think about something entirely different, something that changes everything. And the strange part, once you discover what that one thing is, you'll wonder how you ever operated without it. Let me tell you something that took me 20 years to truly understand. I grew up believing that success was about working harder than everyone else. More hours, more effort, more sweat. I thought the equation was simple. Effort equals results. But here's what happened. I worked like crazy for years. 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks. I was exhausted. I was grinding. And yet, I kept watching people work less than me, achieve more than me. Much more. That bothered me. It violated everything I thought I knew. So I started paying attention, really paying attention, not just to what successful people did, but to how they thought. And that's when the real education began. This video isn't about shortcuts. It's not about magic formulas. What you're about to discover is something far more valuable. You're going to learn what separates the top 1% from everyone else. And by the time we're done, you'll see your own situation completely differently. The first thing the top 1% understand is this. Your thinking is the only real asset you own. Not your house, not your car, not your job title, your mind. Your ability to think clearly, to see opportunities others miss, to connect ideas in new ways. That's everything. Most people approach life with a poverty mentality. Not poverty of money necessarily, but poverty of possibility. They've accepted the constraints they see around them as permanent. They see a problem and think it's unsolvable. They see a goal and think it's unreachable. They see their current situation and believe it's their destiny. But the top 1%, they look at the exact same world and see something completely different. They see problems as opportunities waiting to be discovered. They see obstacles as information, not roadblocks. Let me give you a real example. Years ago, I knew two men. One was a mechanic making $30,000 a year. The other had the exact same job, same employer, same pay. But within 5 years, one of them owned his own shop. The other was still punching a clock. What was the difference? It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't opportunity. It was thinking. The man who succeeded started asking different questions. Instead of thinking, how do I keep this job? He thought, what would it take to own this business? He wasn't smarter. He was thinking smarter. This is what separates the top 1%. They understand that before you change your results, you have to change your thinking. Not your circumstances, not your luck, your thinking. Here's where most people get stuck, and this is crucial to understand. They believe that thinking better is something that happens naturally, like it's magic, like successful people were just born knowing how to think differently. But that's not how it works. Thinking like the top 1% is a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned. It can be practiced. It can be mastered. The top 1% invest in their thinking constantly. They read, they listen, they study. They find people who are thinking at a higher level and they learn from them. And here's what's interesting. They never stop doing this. Even when they reach success, they keep learning. They keep evolving their thinking. Most people stop investing in themselves the moment they finish school. That's their first mistake. The top 1% understand that formal education ends, but real education is lifelong. I remember a conversation with a wealthy businessman. He was reading a book on economics. I asked him why, since he'd already succeeded. He looked at me and said, I read so I can stay successful. Reading isn't for people trying to catch up. It's for people trying to stay ahead. That one sentence changed how I saw personal development. It's not just for the struggling. It's for everyone who refuses to become stagnant. And the top 1% refuse to become stagnant. Now, the second critical difference in how the top 1% think is this. They focus on value creation, not money extraction. This distinction is everything. Most people focus on earning. They think about their paycheck, their raises, their bonuses. They're focused inward on what they can take. The top 1% are different. They're focused outward. They think about who they can serve, what problems they can solve, what value they can create for others. And here's the beautiful part. When you focus on value creation, money becomes almost a side effect. I knew a young entrepreneur who started a business with almost no money. He had one idea: solve a specific problem that his friends complained about constantly. He didn't start the business to get rich. He started it to help people. Within 3 years, he was making more money than people who'd been in business for 20 years. Why? Because when you focus on the value, the money follows naturally. But here's what most people don't realize. When you focus on money, you're fighting thousands of other people doing the same thing. It's competitive, it's exhausting. But when you focus on value, you're focused on how to serve better, how to solve problems more creatively, how to make people's lives better. That's not competitive, that's rare. And rare is profitable. The top 1% have figured this out. They know that the path to wealth is paved with service, not with self-interest. And this is why they can make money in their sleep. It's because they've built something valuable, something people need, something people will pay for. There's another pattern I noticed about the top 1% that most people completely miss. They think in systems, not events. What does that mean? Most people think about their lives as a series of events. They get a job. They work for a while. They might get promoted. They might change jobs. It's all just things that happen to them, events. The top 1% think differently. They think about systems, daily habits, compound growth, small decisions that ripple over time. They understand that success isn't one big moment. It's the result of one small moments done consistently. Let me illustrate this. Person A reads for 1 hour a day. Person B doesn't read. That seems like a small difference. Insignificant, right? But let's see what happens over time. In 1 year, Person A has read roughly 365 hours of material. That's about 9 40-hour work weeks of pure learning. Over a decade, that's 90 weeks. That's nearly 2 years of full-time education, just from one daily habit. Now multiply that. Person A also exercises consistently, also keeps detailed finances, also builds meaningful relationships intentionally. Person B does none of these things. The gap doesn't widen slowly. It widens exponentially. This is what the top 1% understand. They're not looking for quick wins. They're building systems that compound over time. They know that the person who saves $100 a month will accumulate far more wealth than the person who gets a lucky $1,000 bonus. Systems beat luck every single time. And the top 1% have designed their entire lives around systems. That's not accident. That's design. Now I want to share something that changed everything for me. And I think it will change everything for you too. The top 1% understand the power of leverage. And leverage doesn't mean what most people think it means. It's not about borrowing money or manipulating people. Real leverage is about multiplying your impact without multiplying your hours. Here's the difference between someone making $50,000 a year and someone making $500,000 a year. The $50,000 person is trading their hours for money. 40 hours a week equals $50,000 a year. If they want to make more, they have to work more. But there are only so many hours in a week. The $500,000 person figured out how to create leverage. Maybe they built a product that sells without them being there. Maybe they built a team that multiplies their impact. Maybe they created intellectual property that generates income continuously. The key is this: their income is not capped by their hours. A programmer working at a company trades his knowledge for a salary. But a programmer who creates software products trades his knowledge for unlimited potential. Same knowledge, different leverage. The top 1% are obsessed with finding leverage. They ask themselves constantly, how can I create value that scales? How can I multiply my impact? How can I build things that work for me when I'm not working? This thinking transforms everything. And here's what's beautiful about this. You don't need to be an entrepreneur to use leverage. You can leverage knowledge. You can leverage relationships. You can leverage timing. You can leverage other people's platforms. The form of leverage varies, but the principle is the same. Find a way to multiply your impact without multiplying your effort. I want to tell you about something that separates the top 1% in a very fundamental way. They've made peace with the idea of delayed gratification. Most people want what they want right now. That's the modern world we live in. Instant everything, instant food, instant entertainment, instant gratification. And this has trained our brains to want results immediately. So here's what happens. Someone starts a business, and it's not making money in 3 months, so they quit. Someone starts an exercise routine and doesn't see results in 2 weeks, so they stop. Someone reads about investing and doesn't see a return in a year, so they pull their money out. This is the average person thinking. The top 1% think in decades, not days. They're willing to invest in things now that won't pay off for years. They're willing to do work that nobody sees for extended periods of time because they understand something crucial. The big rewards always come later. I knew an author who wrote in obscurity for 8 years. 8 years. Nobody knew his name. Nobody was buying his books. But he kept writing, he kept learning, he kept improving his craft. By year 9, things started to shift. By year 12, he was a best-selling author. By year 15, he was wealthy beyond measure. Now most people would have quit in year 2, or year 3, or year 5 at the latest. But this man understood something fundamental. Success in one field often requires years of unrewarded work before the dam breaks and everything changes at once. This is what separates the top 1% from everyone else. They're willing to be patient. They're willing to invest in the unseen. They're willing to do the work now and collect the rewards later. And because they're willing to do this, they eventually reach a point where most people can't touch them. Here's something that sounds simple, but it changes your entire relationship with success. The top 1% think of themselves differently than everyone else. This is about identity. Not what you do, but who you are. Most people define themselves by their circumstances. I'm not a writer. I'm not a business owner. I'm not rich. And because that's their identity, they act in ways consistent with that identity. A person who says, I'm not a writer, won't write. A person who says, I'm not athletic, won't exercise. But the top 1% shift this completely. They adopt the identity of success before they achieve success. They see themselves as the kind of person who succeeds. They see themselves as the kind of person who learns, the kind of person who persists, the kind of person who serves others. And here's the power of this. Once you adopt that identity, your choices change automatically. A person who sees themselves as healthy eats differently. A person who sees themselves as smart learns differently. A person who sees themselves as wealthy manages money differently. This is why the wealthy can often bounce back from financial disasters. They still see themselves as wealthy people. Their identity didn't change, so they make decisions consistent with that identity, and they rebuild quickly. Are you someone who learns, or someone who's satisfied with what they know? Are you someone who tries, or someone who gives up? Are you someone who serves, or someone who takes? Your identity determines your trajectory. The top 1% understand this completely. They guard their identity like it's their most valuable possession. I want to share one more thing that might be the most powerful insight you hear today. The top 1% understand the relationship between failure and growth. Most people see failure as something to avoid at all costs. It's embarrassing, it's painful, it means something is wrong with you. So they play small, they stay safe. They never risk anything meaningful. The top 1% see failure completely differently. They see it as information, as feedback, as the price of admission to learning something valuable. And because they frame failure this way, they're willing to fail constantly. Think about it this way. An entrepreneur who tries 10 businesses and fails 9 times has learned more than someone who's never tried. That person knows what doesn't work. They've built resilience. They've developed problem-solving skills. They've learned humility. By the 10th business, they're far more likely to succeed. Not despite the failures, but because of them. Most people never start a single business because they're afraid of that failure. So they end up with 0 success and 0 learning. The entrepreneur has 9 failures and 1 success. Who won? The top 1% have figured out something that seems backwards, but is absolutely true. The path to success is paved with failure. The question isn't whether you'll fail. The question is whether you'll learn from it. Now let me bring all of this together, because this is where it gets really interesting. The top 1% aren't smarter than you. They're not luckier. They're not working 1,000 times harder. What they've done is think differently about a few key things. And when you compound those differences, you get a completely different life. They think about their mind as their greatest asset. They continuously invest in improving it. They think about creating value instead of extracting money. They think in systems and compound growth instead of quick wins. They leverage their effort through products, people, and platforms. They're willing to delay gratification for significant rewards. They adopt the identity of success before they achieve it. And they see failure as feedback, not defeat. When you look at these pieces individually, none of them seem revolutionary. But when you put them together, when you start making decisions based on these principles, when you start thinking like the top 1%, everything changes. Your choices change, your results change, your entire trajectory shifts. I remember the moment I truly grasped this. I was sitting in my office, looking at my life. I had worked hard, but I realized I had been working on the wrong things. I had been thinking like everyone else, chasing quick results, avoiding risks, thinking short-term. The moment I started thinking differently, everything shifted. It wasn't overnight. Nothing worth having ever is. But within a few years, my income had increased dramatically. My impact had multiplied. And most importantly, my life felt aligned with my values. I wasn't just making money. I was building something meaningful. And here's the truth that might scare some people but should excite you. This is all still available to you, right now, today. Your circumstances don't matter. Your past doesn't matter. Your education doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is whether you're willing to start thinking differently. Because the top 1% weren't all born in wealthy families. They didn't all go to elite schools. Many of them started with nothing. But they had one thing. They were willing to think differently than everyone around them. And now you know how they think. You know the specific patterns. You know the principles. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. It feels good to learn these things, but if you don't change how you operate, your life will stay exactly the same. And that would be tragic, because you now know the path. You now know what separates success from mediocrity. You now know what the top 1% know. So start today. Start small if you need to. Maybe you start reading more. Maybe you start asking better questions. Maybe you start thinking about how you can create value for others. Maybe you start adopting the identity of someone who's going to succeed. Pick one thing, just one, and start. Because here's what I know for certain. If you think like the top 1% over time, you will become the top 1%. Not because you got lucky, not because circumstances changed, but because thoughts become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character, and character becomes destiny. And your destiny is waiting. It's waiting for you to start thinking like the person who deserves it. If this changed the way you think, subscribe, because the next lesson may be even more important for your journey.